So, why should we care about water issues and how they relate to conflict? In this section, I wanted to highlight a couple of areas across the different outcomes that we look at in this class, ranging from conflict between major power nuclear states all the way down to individual level human security issues and development that all relates to the quality of water we put in our bodies. So these are a couple of areas you might have seen already in your own classes, but for those of you who aren't doing papers on water issues, or for those of you who don't have this kind of background, I think this allows us to kind of get a couple of issue areas that we're going to be talking about today and in subsequent weeks that I think are relevant to the topics in this class. So, why should we care about water and conflict? I would say, first of all, because there is a lot of worry in areas around the world that water issues could lead to conflict, including between nuclear powered states like India and Pakistan. Here, article from last week talking about how these long-term rivals share a common water resource and how tensions between what the upstream and downstream countries do could lead to potential conflict. Other ones are between India and China, another nuclear powered major power state next door. There have been ongoing tensions along the India Chinese border for the last couple months now, as of when I'm filming this, and water issues are but one tool that both sides have. India upstream in the Pakistani case and downstream in the Chinese case to kind of show you how it is too simple to kind of say that one state is only has one relation or one set of tools that they use or that others can use against them. So there's been struggles between a lot of countries around the world. The readings for today go into more detail about rivers as boundaries and water as a potential source of conflict. I think this area is interesting and useful to start with because of the number of water systems that over a third of the world's population depend on come from this basic area. You see here a screenshot of a number of different water basins, and you can see the Ganges, the Indus, the Yellow River, the Yangtze, Brahmaputra, the Mekong, all kind of originate from the high Tibetan plateau or nearby that flows in all different directions. And that's why I thought I would start the lecture with this slide from Mount Kailash, which is right smack dab in the middle of the high Tibetan plateau, one of the holiest mountains in the world to three of the world's religions. People make pilgrimages to this mountain from India, but also from other parts of the world. There is a tradition that if you do walk around and make the 4 day circuit around the mountain, the sins of a lifetime have been forgiven. Back in 2000, I actually made the trek out there. It took weeks, and we didn't go with an organized tour. There were just muddy roads. One place we got stuck for 6 hours. Now, from what I understand, 20 years later, there's nice paved highways, and you can do it in a couple of days from Lhasa. But it was the end of the world when I was out there. But it isn't the end of the world for international relations because there have been recent political scientists who have tried to map where Chinese missile bases are located. And when I was there, there was discussion that there was a missile base there right near the border with India that China had in case there was escalating tensions between the two states. So it is this kind of crazy four-sided mountain that faces the four cardinal directions, and four of the major world's river systems emanate from Mount Kailash. The Indus, as and the what ends up turning into the Ganges, the Karnali, the Sutlej, which has really good whitewater rafting in Nepal, if you ever make it back to Nepal, Sutlej, and the Brahmaputra. So this is an area in which you have a concentrated amount of resources that a large amount of people across a number of states in the region depend on. You can kind of see here from this Google map how close it is to both Nepal, India. You can see Pakistan over to the left, and so you have um, this scarce resource that originates in one country, but that downstream countries depend on. And this just every year you see around this time people making the pilgrimage over the border. There have been political tensions between the two countries that have led to the suspension of pilgrims crossing the border. And I honestly don't know if they're allowed to go this year. But and Maranasaravar Lake is about 25 miles from Mount Kailash. I walked it in a hellish day, but now you can just bike there or drive, and there's nice places to stay by this really high Arctic lake. Side note. So this is an area in which you don't have that many glaciers in this high Tibetan plateau. You do have some around in the Karakoram and the Himalaya. This is another picture of disappearing glaciers that are not from the Himalayas, but rather the Glacier National Park in the United States. If I ever get back to the United States, it's always on my bucket list of places I want to go to, not least because Glacier National Park, one of the oldest national parks in the United States, is also one that's going to lose the glaciers that it has supposedly within the next 20 years or so. So I want to go see the glaciers before they actually disappear. But you see these where you have the seasonal snow there is getting smaller year over year. So there's a lot of places, a lot of examples that I could choose of where water is changing over time. With the Mekong, and there's been issues with high water flows. China is upstream and has built dams along that river. Other areas, there's been, and we're going to talk about Central Asia in a little bit, there's been efforts at trying to regulate the flows, but this does change. And Glacier Bay is definitely, Glacier National Park is not the only place that's losing glaciers. A couple of other examples is one is from Iceland. These photos show the Ökjul Glacier in Iceland in 1989 and then 2019. So within 30 years, basically all the glaciers have disappeared on this on this mountain, which you might have heard of last year when the Icelandic government commemorated the loss of the glacier with this plaque nearby. And so there's a recognition that the glacier systems around the world are changing, and some of them are just disappearing, which means the water resources, not necessarily in Iceland, there's other sources of water there, but in areas like Glacier National Park or others, it is disappearing. Mount Kilimanjaro, another example. Hemingway wrote a book about the snows of Kilimanjaro, short stories, 80, 90 years ago. Beautiful place to visit as well. The glaciers from Kilimanjaro are also disappearing. I was also there about 20 years ago, and there was a couple of small glaciers up at the top, but they're also the snows of Kilimanjaro are also supposed to disappear within the next 15 or 20 years, and the water flowing off the mountain would also have concurrent effects of the changing water flows. This article was from 11 years ago already, so we have less than 9 years. So possible conflicts over water resources, where the water is and how it's stored is changing in at least 3 continents that I've touched on so far, and where the water is and how it's stored in ice is also changing over time. There's been concerns about water pollution no matter where you are. This article from last year I thought was really compelling because in the most isolated and supposedly pristine parts of the world, like the Arctic and the Antarctic, scientists have started to discover microplastics deep within in the snowpacks. So our plastic bags, those I think most countries have gotten rid of those little beads that used to be in our body wash, but the microplastics, as they get ground down in our oceans, have found their way into ice cores in the Arctic and around the world. And yeah, scientists are discovering the fact that we're living in the Anthropocene and unanticipated consequences of it in a lot of different places around the world. And that's a scientific study generated, and you can see different kind of pictures for the microplastics. Let's see. Yep. This is another scientific article that came out recently that tested bottled water. I don't think they actually tested the Voss water that I drank, but Dasani and other major water bottle, Nestle and the major producers, they tested the bottled water and found that 93% of them had significant detectable levels of microplastics. And so there's an ongoing discussion about whether these microplastics in our digestive tracts are having long-term effects, but even those kind of pristine bottled water that we think we're getting often do have these small amounts of microplastics. It's not on the other side of the world, it's actually in the bottled water in developing countries like Australia. So you have water affecting likelihood of conflict, water distribution changing, and the content of and the ability to get unadulterated water has shifted quickly. I don't need to tell anybody in Australia the effect of having not enough water in agricultural production and elsewise. In Australia, water is always the most common topic in this class, and it's leading to widespread drought in agricultural production regions in Australia, and combine that with the increased probability of fires due to the dry conditions. In September now, we've been through a lot in 2020. I don't know what the rest holds in store, but I think the unpredictability of water in our society is not something that's unique to Australia, but it's one that we're definitely feeling directly. So I think for me, these are just a few examples of water resources, where they are can change, and it will connect with some of the research project that you guys want to focus on. But I also want to get you to think about, regardless of the topics that really interest you in this class, how water might play a role in affecting those outcomes that you're looking at, and whether it does have that kind of multi-step process in increasing scarcity that we've covered in this class so far. But I think just more generally, in connecting it back to these kind of realities in our day-to-day, that we might not take a step back and try to understand the effects of it or the reasons behind them. Have you ever thought about where the water you drink come from and its quality? Have you thought or heard about microplastics in your water? If so, have you ever thought about where it comes from, why, and if not, why not? First lecture question, if you can answer that on Waddle. I've really enjoyed these kind of open-ended questions so far in this class, because I learn a lot more about you as students and your backgrounds, where you're from, and how the topics in this class relate to your experiences. So let's take a break, do that, and come back with more concrete theoretical reasons for why water matters.